much for having us today and inviting us to share this really important information. Super important. So we're going to kind of jump in and get started here right off the bat. And Sherelle, just let me know too, I guess, if you can see my presentation here, okay?
I sure can. It looks great.
All right, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Sherelle, for organizing all this and for the kind of foresight to see the importance of this information to be able to share with employees here at your school district. We love doing this. It's a part of what we do. Obviously, as a credit union, goes without saying, most of y'all know this, but the CAB educators actually started our credit union way back, actually in 1958. And so we're 7 educators that started this, and we've always done a lot with your school district. Always will. Always do a lot with education across the state and a lot of other types of member companies that we work with too. So anyhow, super excited to be able to share this information with you. So as Sherelle mentioned, so it's Preventing Identity Theft is a title. And I'm going to share with you, pay close attention because I'm going to share some statistics that may be actually a little bit alarming with respect to this topic. And so pay close attention. We are going to share some things that will kind of help prevent you from becoming a victim of identity theft. So pay close attention, take some notes, and I think you'll find some of this information very valuable and practical. So we're going to kind of dive in here right away and get started. Obviously, Georgia Night Credit Union, you know a lot about us already, I believe, but basically, like I said, actually DeKalb educators actually started our credit union. So we have a lot of different things that we offer and some unique things that we offer too. I would encourage you just to visit gucu.org and kind of get up to date on some of the latest things that we do offer our member companies and our community and everything across the state. So I would advise you kind of go there and maybe get a quick update on some of the things that we're doing for you. So anyhow, seminar overview. So we're going to talk about obviously identity theft and fraud, and there is a difference. And then we're going to kind of talk about some specific examples about how the thieves get a hold of our information and the importance of protecting our social security number. And a lot of this you may already know about or realize, but we're going to kind of talk about some subtle things that you may not have thought about. So some things to really kind of be aware of. If you become a victim, hopefully not, but some things that you'll want to do right away if this does happen to you, if you do become a victim of identity theft or identity fraud. Just in a way of overview, though, I wanted to bring up a few things with you that will kind of hopefully really get your attention. And one of the things that you may not hear a lot about, which is something I really think you need to consider. So obviously this applies to all of us, but what's happening now, some of the trends in the industry are that this topic, this idea of identity theft and fraud, is actually obviously happening to us as an adult, but obviously, or maybe not obviously, things that you may not realize, it's happening to more and more to young people and to children. In fact, the statistics show that 1.25 million children are affected annually now by identity theft and identity fraud. And children under the age of 7 are some of the ones that are most likely to be victimized of that group. So word to the wise, you may want to start really thinking about that if you've got family members or relatives or whatever, young people that are involved or part of your life. You may want to take some caution and at least investigate some things you may want to think about doing to protect young people from becoming a victim. In 2024, the FTC received over 1 million identity theft complaints and recorded more than $12.7 billion in financial losses. So this is a major thing that's occurring. Credit card is the most frequent type of identity theft reported, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in the presentation. Well, credit cards and debit cards, so something you really need to kind of think about. We're going to go into some details here. Georgia, as a matter of fact, ranks 5th in the nation in terms of frequency of occurrence of this. So California is first, Texas is second, Florida is third, New York is fourth. Georgia is actually fifth. Now, these are recent numbers, which this might change and does change actually from time to time. But anyhow, so Georgia ranks right up there near the top. And in terms of the most targeted group for identity theft and fraud, it's actually working adults. So it's us that are working and still engaged, actively engaged out in the workforce. But they're combining, online information or getting information from the things that we do online, from credit access. They kind of the thieves view this as a target of steady, people with steady income. So it's obviously prevalent out there and becoming more and more prevalent. Okay, so identity theft leads to identity fraud. So what does that mean? So what happens is theft happens when someone gets your name, social security number, other identifying types of information, or some combination of all of that. But what happens is it's not just one particular piece that they get from us or capture from us and use it to commit fraud. It's a combination of a lot of things. So social security number, I mentioned that I think just a second ago. That's obviously very, very important. I'm going to kind of give you some ideas about that as we go through here, but just one quick example of that. And these are what I try to do in these presentations. What we try to do is to share some really, really practical things. So let's talk about that while we're in the neighborhood. Social security number. So you're at the doctor's office. Maybe you've got a new appointment and you're filling out forms. Now, obviously, a lot of times we'll fill those out ahead of time, possibly electronically. But if you're filling out a paper form at the doctor's office and it asks for your social security number, I never put it on there. And I've never been asked about that. What happens is this is a real thing. You hear of dumpster diving, and the way that they get information about us that they use to commit the fraud just are real practical ways. So if you put your social security number down on that form and it gets left on the counter or whatever, and somebody sees it and picks it up, away they go. But so just it will cause you to kind of like rethink some things in your life. Now, it doesn't mean that we should be paranoid, but honestly, you should take a pause on some of the things that you're doing, maybe reconsider. That's just one practical example. Fraud is actually when they take that information they've gathered and they fraudulently use it to obtain credit in your name, establish new accounts, make fraudulent purchases, that kind of thing. And honestly, this does occur. I was giving a presentation one time, and actually, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes here, about freezing your credit.
Hello.
And so I had a gentleman come up to me after a presentation and said, well, hey, I took your advice, I froze my credit. And I said, well, great. And he said, no, you don't understand. When he checked his credit history, and by the way, we're going to talk about that too. He found out that was the first place that was obvious to him where he found out that someone in a foreign country had purchased two automobiles and a house under his identity. And that's where it showed up, was in his credit history. So, and we're going to talk about that too as a part of this presentation. So a lot of things that you're going to kind of really want to focus on and pay attention to. Okay, impact on victims. Obviously, it can be a financial impact. It can be a time impact. You see the note on the slide there talking about taking an average over 100 to 200 hours in over a period of 6 months to undo identity theft. So when this happens to us, this takes a lot of effort for us to fix and a lot of time. And that can be time away from our families, time away from our job or whatever. So the point is, it can take a lot of effort to kind of undo this. So word to the wise, again, anything you can do to prevent this from happening in the first place is obviously a good thing because it's going to save you time and money in the end if you have to deal with something like this if it were to happen to you. All right, who is vulnerable? We kind of talked about this a second ago, but I want to reemphasize this. So all of us are vulnerable, including children. I already talked about that a little bit. Another study that was done by the Javelin Research firm in 2024 reveals 1 in 8 minor children have had their identity exposed. So a little bit more information about that. So what can happen is when the young people in our lives have their identity exposed, the kind of I guess their thought process is something like, well, who's ever going to check a child's or a young person's credit history or that kind of thing? Well, and so they know that, and so when they capture that information, it gives them an opportunity to kind of build upon that, commit the fraud, and get away with it without it ever being kind of found out about. So again, it's super, super important. In Georgia, I believe under the age of 16, a parent or legal guardian, you can actually freeze your child's credit. And we're going to talk, excuse me, talk about that in just a second. Super, super important. That's actually the number one thing you can do to protect yourself. So we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. But I'll probably say that several times during this presentation. If you haven't done that, or you have family members that haven't done that, that's again the number one thing you can do to protect yourself against a lot of this stuff happening. So if you don't hear anything else that we talk about today, this morning, that's something you really want to kind of get on your radar. Okay. So what did crooks do with your personal information? Change your billing address, open new accounts, obviously get loans, car loans, whatever. I kind of gave you a real practical example of that. And even to the point of actually doing some things like giving your name during an arrest. So all this can be done, if they capture information about you, all this can be done. So let's talk about let's talk a little bit about how these bad actors actually get the information from us or on us to commit this identity theft and fraud. So obviously while you're out, and by the way too, what's happening is, obviously so much of what in our world is electronic, right? Like I mentioned, you could probably do, and I know you can do, obviously all the forms and stuff for a doctor's office electronically before you get there, which is probably a good thing. A lot of the financial transactions we do obviously are done online, electronically, so that's a good thing, and we're going to talk about that in just a second too. But really what's happening is the most prevalent way that they capture information on us is just day-to-day activities that we have, and just common methods. And so we're going to talk about a little bit about that. So what happens is, they get a piece of information here on you. And by the way, too, social media, be careful. Again, this is nothing against social media. I'm on social media. I think it's a great thing. It can be a great benefit in our lives. Just again, be careful. So here's a quick example of that. So if you and your family are away having a great time at the beach and you're posting out there on social that, we're having a great time and we're having fun and that kind of thing. Well, potentially, what does that tell somebody? That you're not at home. So again, it's not to make you paranoid, but just, maybe take a step back and think about some of the information that you're even sharing out on social media. So also, if someone is trying to capture passwords and that kind of thing, if you're again posting on social media that your favorite cat or dog died, and maybe even mentioning the name of your cat or dog, and then you use that as a password, these thieves know that about us. They know our tendency to use common passwords and that kind of thing for words or whatever, animal names or pet names or whatever. And so it's not hard for them to start piecing this information together. So just again, kind of take a step back and rethink even some of that practical stuff that we're doing in our day-to-day lives. Okay, so another example, this happened to us in one of the neighborhoods that we were living in. They will take bills maybe that you mail out of your mailbox and get the check, wash the check, rewrite it, and cash it. So again, I'm just trying to share with you some really practical things to kind of maybe think about. And while we're on that topic, there's some practical things you could do. A lot of us don't write checks anymore, but if you do write a check, use a gel-based ink pen instead of a ballpoint pen. Well, why would you do that? Well, the point there is that if you use a gel-based pen, it gets into the fibers of the check more than a ballpoint pen does, and it makes it harder for them to wash it and cash it. But again, just some real practical tips and things that we're going to share with you this morning here in our presentation that you can take advantage of. There's another example of what you can kind of do to kind of maybe help minimize some of your risk. But again, they're just gathering this information through common methods. that's happening. So another practical tip here too, in terms of how they're getting information. So let's talk about this a little bit. Um, so skimming, we've all heard about that. That's actually still occurring, and we're going to talk about data breaches in here in just a second. But I wanted to mention this about skimming. So you're like, well, does that still happen? Yes, it does. And matter of fact, the U.S. Secret Service, in collaboration with local police, recently inspected over 9,000 businesses in Georgia cities like Atlanta and Savannah. As a part of this effort, they removed 411 illegal skimming devices from gas pumps and ATMs. So that was over a period of time, 25, 26, 2025, 2026. So that's still occurring. Okay, so what's the lesson? What's the takeaway? If you are buying things, especially with your debit card, for example, like if you're buying gas at a gas pump, I typically go inside and pay inside. That's still happening at these gas pumps. They're putting on skimmers. So they're doing a lot of things now to actually prevent that from happening. But it does still happen. So again, it's not to make you paranoid, but it's to cause you to maybe take a pause and think about some of the things that you're currently doing. So things like that are still occurring, unfortunately. Anyhow, in terms of data breaches, we know those are happening all the time. If you happen to become a victim of identity theft or fraud, we're going to talk about some steps to take later on in the presentation, but there's things like uh, filing police reports, obviously, putting fraud alerts on your credit, ordering your credit reports. And by the way, we're going to talk about that in just a second. The importance, again, of checking your credit history. If you've not done that in a while or a long time or ever, you really need to start doing that. And then placing a security freeze, and we'll talk about that in just a second. As I mentioned, that's the biggest single thing that you can do to prevent identity theft from occurring. Spamming, spoofing, phishing, we've all heard of these. These are things that we know happen out there. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But again, there's a lot of ways that they capture information on us. Again, just be super careful when you're opening up emails or text messages or whatever. Really consider where that is coming from, and especially even in an email. The best way, if you get some type of communication or whatever, go to their website directly. If you're going to links and stuff that are in different social media posts and whatever, that can be problematic. And so I would recommend go to their direct website. Don't be clicking on links, especially if you don't know where those links go to or where they're from. That can be a really, again, problematic area. So spoofing, they can create, really legitimate looking websites and pages, and especially too with AI. Obviously, with all the good things that can be done with AI in our lives, there's a lot of bad things that can be done. And when you're getting messages and even voice calls and that kind of thing, they can spoof a lot of things with AI now. And so down to inflections in your voice. So, I mean, it's really, really sophisticated now what they can do. You've got to be super, super careful. The latest thing, one of the latest trends is something called quishing, and it really relates to QR codes. So be super careful about that. Now, obviously, if it's a legitimate QR code, from a business that you know about, that kind of thing, then that's one thing. Again, if you're not sure about QR codes, that can be an area too where they will collect sensitive information and data on you. So make sure you're dealing with a trusted, reputable company. Obviously, we use QR codes and that kind of thing. But again, make sure it's a reputable company you're dealing with and that you know about. But again, they're looking for so many different ways now to try to get information from us. And again, obviously with the intent of committing fraud. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about AI. So I mentioned that already. So they can create videos, audio recordings, and actually, they can replicate a lot of things in terms of pictures and voices and inflections, all kind of things. And they're honestly it's getting very, very difficult to decipher between real or fake or created fraudulent things. So even to the point of fake and clone voices. So something you probably really want to pay close attention to, unfortunately, as it relates to AI from a fraudulent perspective. Now, obviously, there's a lot of great things in our life that AI can do for us, but again, unfortunately, we have bad actors that are using it for fraudulent purposes. Okay, so it obviously, and specifically with respect to identity theft, they know that can be used in that context as well. A recent Harvard Business School study published found that 60% of participants were duped by AI automated phishing emails. So they did a lot of testing, and obviously, a lot of people fell for AI generated fraudulent things. So again, this is something that is occurring, and very difficult to determine, real versus fake or legitimate versus fraudulent and that kind of thing. So again, just start paying close attention to everything that might be AI connected in terms of, from a fraudulent perspective. Email red flags. So there's things that should be obvious or to you when don't be clicking on links and messages and that kind of thing. That's a big area where they're picking. And by the way, too, on cell phones. So we're going to talk about that in just a second too. So they realize in our society now, a lot of things are being done with our mobile device. And they realize that they're trying to get you to act quickly. They're trying to get you to act before you stop and think. Clicking on links, that kind of thing. There's a lot of really practical tips, and we're going to kind of go over some some websites and some other places that will give you information, more detailed information than what we're covering here at a high level. But again, you can hover over a link and see where it's actually going. And again, if you see some links and emails, you're better off, going to that site or that business via their website and not clicking on links, because there's a lot of spoofing they can do to make you think that something is legitimate, and you click on it quickly. You're in a hurry, and away they go. So again, one of the other big points I want to emphasize is you've got to slow down a little bit enough to take a step back and say, where is this link coming from? Is it legitimate or not? And even internally. So if you're getting emails internally, they can spoof a lot of things, making it look like it might come from a particular management level or different, division within your company. It looks legitimate. It may not be. But again, unfortunately, you've got to really kind of take a step back, take a pause, and kind of look closely at some of those things. But a lot of things are happening via email. A lot of things are happening with our mobile devices too. And they know we're in a hurry, and they're trying to get us to act quickly without thinking. So anyhow, so goes without saying, you got to pay really close attention to a lot of the situations that might seem urgent, or click here and seem legitimate, but you've got to really take a step back and figure out if this is legitimate or not. Okay, protect yourself from phishing attacks. We talked a little bit about this. Don't be clicking on links and emails. Some of the things you can do from a practical perspective, look for that HTTPS, or you'll see sometimes a lock symbol. That should be a clue that something is probably legitimate. But again, too, you've got to take a really close look. Keep your antivirus and firewall softwares up to date. Password protect tax returns we discussed through tax season. Report things that are suspicious. So again, you've got to be real careful to start paying really close attention to those kind of things, and especially on your mobile device. And that's another place to make sure you keep everything up to date. As soon as you find out that there's an update or whatever available for your software on your phone, make sure you update that right away, because what they're doing is they're trying to close off holes in their software or links that they're not aware of. So those updates are super, super important. Don't hesitate or waste any time to make sure those software patches are up to date on your mobile device, laptops, and computers and whatever. But again, just be kind of cautious about who you're getting emails from. If you get an email asking for, you to verify your personal information, whatever, we will never do that. It's correct. We're not going to email you or call you and say, well, hey, we need to verify your, personal information. We're not going to do that. So again, just be aware of some things and ways that people are trying to capture this information from you. Card skimming going digital. I mentioned this a little bit before too. The traditional way that they're doing this has been on putting skimmers on ATMs and gas pumps and that kind of thing. And by the way, too, they're getting more sophisticated in doing that. They have the capability to put really, really small things inside of those slots that you won't even be able to recognize and capture all this information. The digital version of this is occurring as well, and it's not as prevalent here in this area, but certain parts across the country, it is becoming more and more sophisticated. And they're trying to get malicious code put into like checkout areas and that kind of thing. So it's becoming a lot more sophisticated, and they're coming up with new ways to kind of exploit, vulnerabilities in our digital payment systems even. So again, you just kind of have to keep your radar up, unfortunately, all the time, and keep track of it. Do some research about the latest trends and stuff in the field of identity theft and fraud, because you may learn some things that you may not be aware of. So some of the signs that your computer may be affected, if it slows down, obviously we've seen these things before, malfunctions, or won't shut down or start up, pop-up ads. By the way, keep all your, again, goes without saying, keep all their software updates current, and that kind of thing. Just, it takes some time, but again, it's going to save you a lot of headaches in the future. Okay, to protect yourself, we talked about that again, but make sure you do your updates as quickly as possible. Update your antivirus, any malware devices, software on your devices. Two-factor authentication. Okay, let's pause here just for a second. You've got to do this. You've got to make sure that that two-factor authentication, you're using it for your devices and your apps and that kind of thing. Again, that's a really good way to protect yourself. So in addition to signing in, it's going to send you information to double check all that or update that or confirm that on your mobile device and input, a response there. So use that two-factor authentication. That's really a good way to kind of protect yourself. So if you're not doing things like that, make sure you are. Mobile device safety tips. I touched on this briefly. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So make sure your software updates are current. Here's another quick point here too. So if you're using public Wi-Fi, you do not want to be conducting like financial information over that. You don't know if those sites are secure or not. I know it's an easy way to kind of get things done. Perhaps if you're somewhere and you hop on public Wi-Fi, you've got to be super, super, super careful there. And again, the point there is, word of the wise is probably not a good idea to be conducting, financial transactions and that kind of thing on public Wi-Fi. And even general things, just be super, super careful. And obviously mobile devices are a major target for fraud. That's what we use all the time now. So thieves know that. And so they're really targeting that kind of thing. So you have two different basic platforms. So you have, the Apple iOS, you have Android devices. They both are vulnerable. Perhaps the iOS and the Apple are a little bit more secure, but again, too, they're finding ways to kind of get into a lot of our mobile devices as well, especially if there's been holes identified in the software and if you haven't kept your updates current. So word of the wise, again, just be real careful with your mobile devices and keeping everything up to date on it. Deleting your browsing history, that kind of thing. Just, it goes without saying, you've really got to take a close look at how you're using your mobile devices, where you're using them, and for what purpose, that kind of thing. So super important. Okay, social networking safety tips. We talked about that a little bit. Don't share a lot of personal information obviously on social media. I gave you some examples of that. Obviously, review your privacy settings. When's the last time you looked at all your privacy settings on your phone? You kind of have to kind of do some research, figure out, how things should be configured in your privacy settings to protect yourself. Obviously, you're not posting birth dates and places. Anything that they can, again, gather from you and they combine with other pieces of information or from other sources, that's what they do. They collect from all different avenues on us, and they put it together. So just word of the wise, all the social that we use is great, and it's a really help in our lives, but it can be obviously used for fraudulent purposes. So just be super, super careful. And by the way, too, so it's not just us, it's any family members that we have, young people in our life, and that kind of thing. We just take for granted sometimes that that's a safe thing to be out there on and post and all kinds of private information. We really need to kind of think about that. And by the way, too, while we're in the neighborhood, so it's not as prevalent here yet, but in some of the other countries, they're using facial recognition to a large extent to complete a financial transaction. And obviously, our pictures are all over social media and that kind of thing, but it's not too hard to probably capture some of that information and use it fraudulently. So just be aware that that technology is around the corner, and be aware of that. Now there's technology that can prevent potentially someone from using it in a fraudulent way. But again, just kind of take a step back and rethink some of the things that you're doing, even on social media. Social security number, we talked about that. I gave you an example of that. So, don't use the last 4 digits as a PIN. Don't carry it in your wallet. Typically, none of us do that. But even the example I gave you, don't write it down on paper forms at the doctor's office and that kind of thing, especially too as it relates to children. We talked about that, young people. It's just, one of the things that you kind of, again, don't do it, because you think it's necessary, whatever. I've never put it on a form at a doctor's office and never said anything to me. Now they have that information obviously somehow in systems and whatever, but don't make it easy for somebody to kind of capture that. Okay. Other tips to protect yourself, credit free. So we're going to spend some time on this. So again, I mentioned to you that's the single biggest thing that you can do to protect yourself. So you place a credit freeze. You have to do that with all three major credit reporting agencies. So that's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. You can do it online. It's a fairly simple thing to do. But when you do that, nobody can take out anything under your identity. For example, not a loan or line of credit or whatever. And that includes yourself. So when you go for an automobile loan, for example, you would have to find out what reporting agency of those big three that I mentioned that they use, and you'd have to unfreeze your credit. And then obviously for a specific period of time, and then freeze it again. And then you can actually put the dates and times for it to be unfroze and frozen when you do that. But again, that's the single biggest thing you can do to protect yourself. And if you haven't done that, or you have family members that haven't done that, it's something you really, really need to consider. And again, it's free to do. It's easy to do. It's not hard to do. But again, that's something you really want to seriously consider. Okay, checking your credit history. You need to do this on a regular basis. Back when we had COVID and a lot of things went online and there were some issues with some of the stuff happening, and shortly thereafter, all the three major credit reporting agencies have made it available that you can check your credit history for free. And actually, you can check it regularly as you want to, even weekly. But that's something you really want to think about. So why is that important? For a number of reasons. So I gave you an example before. When you are checking your credit history on a regular basis, you may become aware of some fraud that's occurring. Well, that's important for several reasons. Number one, you need to know that it's occurring. And even if it's something that's inaccurate on your credit history, you want to get that off your credit history because that can negatively impact your credit score. So there's a lot of reasons why you want to check your credit history on a regular basis. That it is also easy to do. And we mentioned too here earlier the importance of even protecting your children or young people in your lives from identity theft. So something you kind of want to think about. But certainly, make sure that you freeze your credit. That's again the single biggest thing you can do to protect yourself from a lot of things that we've talked about today. So obviously, there's some other things you can do on a practical level. If you get all these offers in the mail for, lines of credit or credit cards or whatever, honestly, I mentioned to you earlier, it's the simple, practical things that people do and are still doing from a fraudulent perspective to get information. If you get those offers in the mail, just don't throw them away. Dumpster diving is still a thing. So get an inexpensive cross-cut paper shredder. They're fairly inexpensive, and start shredding that information. And other sensitive information that you may have, shred that. Don't just toss it in the trash. So another thing you want to really do is check your account statements from credit card companies and whatever very carefully and on a regular basis. So what happens is they know that if we're not checking this stuff on a regular basis, they may try to commit fraud like on a small level. So maybe a few little small charges here and there. Well, if you're not checking your credit and you don't see that or recognize that, then it's probably a good sign to them that maybe they can do that on a larger scale. So goes without saying, you need to kind of unfortunately go through your statements with a fine-tooth comb and check everything very, very carefully. If you see some charges that don't look quite right, or little small charges in here and there, they think they can get away with it. They can think they can get away with it on a larger scale as well. So again, it's something that causes us to take a step back, pause, and really pay close attention to those kind of things in our life. It takes a little time, yes, but it's going to save you a lot of time in the end, a lot of heartache and headache. In a few that you can prevent yourself from getting in the middle of by checking your statements and that kind of thing on a regular basis. Okay, we talked about this a little bit. So if you're going to be mailing bills, most of us do that electronically. And by the way, too, so I'm going to try to give you some practical examples. We offer something called bill pay. That's actually a lot safer way of paying your bills. So get that set up electronically, and then you're not even mailing your bills. If you do, write a check. I gave you an example of that, the importance of using a gel-based ink pen. So let's get back to the bill pay. So that actually does several things for you. So it can help prevent identity theft. And that's not part of this presentation, but your credit score, a big percentage of that, actually 35% of that, is based on you paying your bills on time. So take advantage of those bill pay services. We offer that. So it does two things. It's going to prevent identity theft and actually can potentially help with your credit score, improve your credit score if you're paying your bills on time. So there's a lot of related things and topics that are important to kind of consider. That's obviously a part of what we're talking about here in terms of identity theft. But that's just one quick example of a way to protect yourself from identity theft and, potentially increase your credit score at the same time. So take advantage of those services that we offer as a credit union. It can help you kind of prevent some of these things from happening to you as well. Okay, warning signs, we talked about that a little bit too, but a lot of times, honestly, there aren't any obvious warning signs. And again, unless you're checking your credit history, if you stop getting bills, for example, in your mail, well, potentially that's a red flag. And we're talking about some of the red flags in a second here. But so what happens is if they can get your information and cause those, change your address, for example, on you, and then you don't start getting your bills in the mail and the way they go, and you never know anything about it because you're not seeing those statements come in. Now, obviously, a lot of times we get those electronically, which is great. But again, just start kind of thinking about some of the unfortunate connections that start happening too if you do become a victim. And some of these things, these red flags, some of these things that start becoming obvious to you and you need to pay attention to. No warning signs. Again, sometimes you don't realize it, but you need to be checking your credit history. We've talked about that. Look for accounts that you don't authorize or haven't authorized. If there are things that are inaccurate on your credit history that you see, obviously get them off of there. But anyhow, so it goes without saying, two super, super important things. If you don't remember anything else we talk about, think about freezing your credit. Think about checking your credit history on a regular basis. Think about what you do with your personal information, where you give it out, how you give it out. And by the way, too, while we're on that topic about your credit history and credit score, the only place you want to go to is annualcreditreport.com. There are imposter sites out there. There are other sites that will charge you fees and that kind of thing. And again, there's credit monitoring services that you can pay for, and that's a personal decision if you want that. But again, I told you the single biggest way you can protect yourself, and that is by freezing your credit. If you want to go any further steps and have monitoring, that's a personal decision. A lot of those places will charge you to do that. And then also, may require access to some of your accounts and that kind of thing. And again, there's security measures in place for all of that. If you feel comfortable, fine. I'm not quite comfortable with a lot of that because, again, a lot of the data breaches happen and that kind of thing. And so there's ways that they can, get into systems and stuff that maybe we're not aware of, and ways that they can get around some of the security that is there. So again, just kind of rethink some of those things in your life. But it goes without saying, you kind of have to check a lot of things in your life now to kind of keep ahead of this, or try to keep ahead of them, the fraudulent actors out there. Okay, if you do become a victim, there's a lot of good information about this out there. So a lot of government websites that you can go to, FTC and that kind of thing. They will give you detailed steps, but basically you want to act quickly. So if you become a victim, act quickly. You can report it right away, obviously to your creditor, obviously to place fraud alerts on your credit history. Complete an ID theft affidavit after you've filed the police reports and all that kind of thing. You want to have all this documented, goes without saying. And then two, the credit freeze is mentioned here again. There's a difference between a fraud alert and the credit freeze. If you place a fraud alert, then if someone tries to obtain credit under your identity, then they have to go through several steps to kind of verify who that person is that's requesting it. So there's some precautions put in place. But again, the credit freeze is where you've frozen it, and nobody can take a new credit under your name, even you, until you unfreeze it. So that's actually the most secure way to prevent anything from in the future from happening. And then on a proactive basis, you can even prevent this stuff from happening to begin with. But anyhow, so do your research. But again, it goes without saying, you need to act quickly if you do become a victim of fraud. So here's some good sites I mentioned to you earlier. A couple of these are referenced in many ways. Consumer.ftc.gov. There's some really good government websites. Obviously, Clark Howard. Obviously, Georgia United. We have a lot of additional information on our website that relates to this topic and other topics. There's videos and different articles and that kind of thing that you can read on our website for more detailed information. But again, start doing some research in all these areas and kind of figure out, what you need to do personally to protect yourself based on what we've talked about today and some of this additional information that you can gather. So that's basically the presentation. Hopefully you found a few important things here to kind of consider and pay attention to. And we can take a few questions here if you want to. But again, thank you for allowing us to provide this information to you, something we love doing. Go to our website, gucu.org, for a lot of additional information. Call us. If you do become a victim, please feel free to go into one of our branches. There's a lot of things that they can help you with practically. with respect to what we've talked about today, but we're here to help you. And please do not be afraid or hesitant to reach out to us.
I have a question, Steve.
Okay.
I have noticed on some sites that I've been trying to get on, it'll say like the pass key
Mm-hmm.
access or create a pass key something. Do you know what I'm talking about? I think that's what it said, pass key code or something.
Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
on earth is that? And every time I try to do, well, I think one time I tried and it was just taking me all around the world and I could just never, because LinkedIn, I'm kicked out of my LinkedIn now because of that. And it keeps saying for the pass key. And so I can't even get in my LinkedIn account.
Yeah, I would be real careful about those kind of things. And again, the best way is obviously contact the source, meaning whoever you're, that's requesting that information. And first
Mm-hmm.
of all, make sure it's legit, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot, again, what can happen is people can spoof those links and say, well, hey, we need your passcode, or we need you to update your passcode or
Mm-hmm.
password, that kind of thing. I would say, I guess, if you have an issue, contact them directly.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't feel comfortable with the link or what it's asking you to do. Um, and again, with AI, so much of that can be, you know, um, fabricated, obviously from a fraudulent
Right.
perspective.
It just
And
makes
we can't, it's
everything
hard to tell,
scary.
obviously, it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
And there's so many places that, are offering that. Now, if it's a legitimate site, then that's one thing. But again, if you don't feel comfortable, I would try to reach out to them directly and, and ask for, assistance or whatever, rather than, acting without being sure. I don't know if that helps you or not, but there's so many different situations where that could occur.
Oh,
And I would reach out to them directly.
okay. Because it's been more than just one site. And it's funny. I
Yeah.
was going to tell you what the message was and everything. And I just
Hmm.
clicked on LinkedIn and it just let me in.
Yeah.
That has never, I've been
Yeah.
locked out for I don't know how long now. So
I know. I know.
I was going to show it to you. I guess I should have called you first to tell you, and
No,
then
it's
I could
okay.
have got
But
in weeks ago.
yeah, no, I understand. It's okay. But again, you have to be so careful. And obviously, as a credit union, we treat this very seriously. I mean, there's a lot of protection, obviously, for your accounts and for us, even internally as employees, that steps we have to go through, 2 or 3 different steps or more sometimes to kind of, log into things and whatever. And as part of that's, the two-factor authentication. And there's other verification steps and stuff too. And a lot of companies are asking for that, which is a good thing. But I
Hmm.
would just be super careful. If you're not quite sure, would reach out to them directly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Um, any other quick questions? And again, we want to really take some time to think about what we're doing, and especially too, I can't overemphasize this enough. Young people in our lives, they may not be aware of a lot of this. As adults, we typically potentially maybe follow along a little bit more closely. Although, the young crowd too pay attention, but I would just say, if you have family members or whatever that need to hear this, share the information with them,
Right.
talk to them, because all of us, they get so busy, we get so busy, and just kind of assume that things are safe, sites are safe and whatever. But again, especially with AI, there's so much of that can be duplicated and replicated and make it look realistic, and it's really not. Um,
Hmm.
but anyhow, but again, if you haven't checked your credit history in a long time or ever, and by the way, too, in that along those same lines, check all 3 agencies, and all 3 agencies will collect a little bit different type of information on you,
Hmm.
and will have a little bit different credit score, and that's a whole nother webinar topic. But it's suffice it to say that you really kind of need to be checking all that on a regular basis. Um, and with all 3 agencies, and again on a frequent basis.
Okay. We have
Um,
we have a compliment to GUCU in the chat that says they helped one of our staff members tremendously when they were a victim of identity theft and fraud, and they just called the number. So they were very appreciative. So shout
that's
out to GUCU for that.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's awesome. And again, we love to, hear that, and that's what we want to be known for.
Mhm.
Obviously, the service end of it is huge for us, and providing that, personalized, tremendous, personalized, specific service as well, because, all of us in our individual lives have unique things. And that's what we're here to do, is to kind of help each individual with all of that. And
Okay.
so we appreciate that comment. Yeah.
Yep. And then we also have a question. One person says that their bank did not approve the fraud that took place on their account. And is there anything else that they can do?
Yeah. What I would say, and again, do some research. Like the FTC is a really good place to go to. There's steps and there's ways that you can kind of um, deal with that. And the main thing I would say, I guess, too, is make sure all of that's really documented when it does occur, and have that ready. And there's ways too that you can reach out with the 3 different agencies too, and
Mhm.
request their help and assistance. Um, but the main thing you want to do, and again, I would say, be very careful. Now, obviously, the debit card is a huge thing. We talked about that a little bit. I mentioned that. Be very careful in how you use your debit card. Now, obviously, as a credit union, if some fraud occurs on your credit card or debit card, we're going to help you with that, um, and get funds back for you and that kind of thing. But be super careful. I mean, I typically don't use my debit card to purchase things online. I don't use it where I can't see someone and what they're doing with it. Um, so if I'm going through a drive-through and whatever, and I use my debit, or they want the debit card, or I use it or whatever, and I can't see, I typically don't do it. Use my debit card, but again, that's a somewhat of a personal thing. But be very cautious with how you use your debit card.
Mhm.
That obviously is a direct linkage to your account, and money can be drained out of there. Now, obviously, from a fraudulent perspective, we will help you with that. But just be real careful about how you're using your debit card and credit card. I would offer that piece of advice as well. In terms of, the fraud in your financial institution, make sure again you've got everything well documented.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, we're going to work with you, and the example was actually given here in the chat. We're going to help you work through all of that.
Mhm.
And so we're working on your behalf, obviously, to get that resolved.
Mhm.
I can't speak to other, places, but the best thing to do, I guess, is to make sure you have all that documented. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Any other questions? Or thank you again so much for Sherelle for inviting us to share this information. We love doing this. Again, check out our website. We have a lot of information out there on the same topics, additional details and that kind of thing, but kind of wanted to hit the highlights with you. And so thank you for taking the time out to invite us and allowing us to share all this.
absolutely. Absolutely. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Miss Campbell has her hand raised.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to elaborate on my comment about how Georgia United has helped me when I was a victim of fraud. I
Hmm.
didn't have to call them. They actually called me and alerted me to something that happened while I was asleep. And I want to also go on record and say, I want to say several years ago, I was a victim of somehow they were able to get all of my checking information, and somebody was writing checks in Florida and all of these places. And Georgia United refunded all of my money back, and it was in excess of $5,000.
Wow.
Yes,
Nice.
so
Yeah.
definitely the best place to be when things like this happen, because they
Well, we
restored
appreciate
me.
that. Yeah,
Yes.
we appreciate that. And oh, by the way, too, and that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. Marcia, because here's something else too that you need to do. Okay, when you have your account set up, make sure you sign up, because we will get with you if we notice something, but make sure you sign up for alerts. And so whenever charges are made, for example, like on your credit card or whatever, you can sign up to get alerts when that happens.
Mhm.
I do
Okay.
that myself. And so, if you have a family member, and it's not that you're trying to track who's using, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying sign up for those alerts. Make it easy, or actually make it hard for someone to commit fraud, because when you see those alerts come in, if you know that you've used that card at that particular establishment or vendor or whatever, it will show you that that charge has occurred and that transaction has occurred. That can really tip you off. If you see some things popping up there that you didn't do, then that's a red flag, obviously. But make your life easy. Sign up for those alerts, which you can do for us, from us on your accounts, and make sure, and then you'll get those confirmations when those transactions occur. And obviously, hopefully, those are legitimate transactions. But again, take advantage of those ways to kind of keep yourself up to date. But that's a great point.
I think
Um,
I have them, but I think I probably have the amount too high. I need to lower
mm,
it because
yeah.
you can kind of because what happens is exactly what you said. They'll start with little purchases first that
Mm-hmm.
kind of fly
Mm-hmm.
under the radar, and then they'll say,
Yep.
okay, well that went through. Let me try something more.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I will do that. I'll go in and lower that amount, those amounts.
Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you so much.
Oh, yeah, you're more than welcome. Great thing to do. Well, again, thank you so much. I want to be respectful of your time. We're about out of time here. So again, reach out to us. Um, and we're happy to help you at any point with anything in your financial life. And I'm happy to do that and great to more than pleased to do it. So anyhow, I hope you all have a great day. And thank you again for allowing us to share this information with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Thank you all for
All right.
joining. Have a great
All
day,
right.
everyone.
All right. Y'all have a
Thank
great day.
you.
Thank you.